Ladies and gentlemen, this is my pleasure today to welcome you all to our infrastructure conference within the Infra Week. As you remember, every year we've been actually doing research on infrastructure and how major trends can affect our industry, how we can collectively act to change things for the better good. And we've been working on different kind of trends. We've been working on digitalization. We've been working on climate change, on social license to operate. We did also work on the circular economy. And so this year is a fifth year where we are this time trying to encapsulate this research with the creation of a think tank. And the idea is really to collectively engage in this discussion. The thematic that we chose this year is on inclusion and how infrastructure can tackle issues of inequalities. Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, infrastructures are the very building blocks of our society. We are designing them, conceiving them, developing them, and operating them for the very service of communities. And they are generally designed by the public entities. So we work together, public and private, hand in hand, with a very objective of bringing something which will be efficient, which will foster the economic development, but we also have the safeguard of the public sector, making sure that these are effectively procuring services in an equitable way, in an affordable way. So this means that whatever we do, we try to figure out ways of making it affordable, accessible, and available, and having in mind that this has also to be acceptable for communities. And this is how things have to work. But then when you think about all the mega trends that we are facing, we are faced with so many challenges. Our generation is going to have the weight on its shoulders to measure whether we are going to be up to the challenge of climate change. And this means we have roughly, if I just quote the Global Infrastructure Hub, it's about $6.7 trillion a year until 2040 if we want to make it for the actually 1.5 degrees Paris Agreement target, which means the amount of investment is just huge. So it's high time that we make sure that no one is going to be left behind. This is one of the SDG objectives, number 10, but we have to have this in mind at every step in the conception of our infrastructure, in the way we are going to deliver them. Are they actually answering a proper need? Are they effectively going to meet what we were looking for? And this is actually in our hands. So let's work together. I'm happy to tell you that we have gathered prominent professionals. We have been working on this study with Altermind, and they have been brilliantly delivering, bringing us both academics and technical expertise. And we have today several panels that will actually interact on the very subject of inequalities and how some infrastructures, which were initially designed for the very purpose of delivering something which is efficient, then actually discovered that they were in fact creating inequalities that we have to tackle afterwards. So then afterwards we will have inspirational speech, and then we will be followed by another panel which will be focusing more on the future of infrastructure and what we have in our hands. And we hope that the think tank which we have created will ultimately gather the largest number of people, because we have to act together. There is no way out. And please let me welcome our Minister of Energy Transition, Ecology, and Risk and actually Preservation. Thank you for being with us, Agnès Pannier-Runacher.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me this morning. First, I would particularly like to thank Mathieu Laine. I've often witnessed his remarkable commitment to addressing various transition challenges, actively engaging private sector players. His dedication is invaluable for public decision makers, and thank you for your introduction speech and your commitment also to those issues. I also would like to thank you for having me to discuss a crucial topic, the importance of ensuring a fair transition. It is essential to avoid repeating the mistakes made with the biased vision of the so-called happy globalization. Happy globalization has often overstated the benefits of globalization while downplaying its downsides, such as unequal access to prosperity. To make green transition both successful and inclusive, we must ensure that it is made accessible to everyone in their everyday lives. Why? Because a non-inclusive transition is doomed to fail. Allow me then to share my vision of a green transition that succeeds because it is both economically and climatically efficient, and as you have so aptly expressed in your work, because it leaves no one behind. In a single word, my vision can be summed as popular. Environmental transition needs to be popular for different reasons. First, because sustainable public policies cannot be built if they are seen designed to inconvenience or exclude parts of the population. In France, particularly in suburban and rural areas, there is a perception that ecology is a concern reserved for the wealthy, for those living in big cities, people who, in the eyes of many, do not grapple with the same everyday challenges. And the so-called ecologists bear significant responsibility in that matter. They have managed to convince French people that transition inevitably means sacrifice, punishment, and degrowth. But when you truly listen to what French people are actually saying, they are deeply concerned about the green transition. I was recently elected as Member of Parliament in the north of France, in the Pas-de-Calais. On the campaign trail, I often heard people say, "Don't talk to me about the green transition." But as your conversation unfolded, what did they bring up? Their children asthma because of air pollution, concerns about junk food, the quality of their drinking water. Actually, they talked to me about their day-to-day issues, never noticing that in fact they were talking about ecology. That is the urge for our public policies, connecting more closely the daily issues of the French people, of the people, with the tangible benefit they could gain with the transition. And this brings me to my second point. For ecology to be popular, it needs to offer co-benefits to those who commit to the transition. In your work, you focus on a very interesting topic, low emission zones, highlighting the risk they pose in exacerbating inequalities. You're right, and we must be vigilant to ensure that these zones don't unfairly penalize working people living in suburban areas. But we must also emphasize the co-benefits of these zones. First, their reduced CO2 emissions. Second, these areas directly improve air qualities and thus public health. By reducing air pollution, we help decrease dramatically cases of bronchiolitis and asthma among children, especially in low-income families. For ecology to be popular, it must also facilitate a genuine value sharing. We need to build a virtuous cycle where decarbonization, reindustrialization, job creation, and fighting climate change go hand in hand. Thus, we need to foster investments in the transition. To do so, we need to ensure economic consistency and visibility. We need to show that France has a clear and precise plan. We all know the importance of being earnest in those matters. Good news, it is precisely the whole purpose of the ecological planning we started in 2022. The work that has been done sector by sector is, in my view, quite unique in the world. It has already delivered results. In 2023, we reduced our emission by 5.8%, which is the right path to meet the targets set by the Paris Agreement. Ecological planning gives a very clear indication to companies, local authorities, citizens of the path we are taking. This approach is grounded in the principle of subsidiarity. It is up to the state, to the government, to set the target, while the local actors are empowered to build the solutions. And this is where the subject of infrastructures becomes so crucial. Now that the targets are set, we must accelerate the transformation of our infrastructure to adapt them to the issue of what is undeniably the challenge of our century, tackling climate change and collapse of biodiversity. In the core challenge of adaptation, just 10 days ago, alongside Prime Minister Michel Barnier, we launched our climate change adaptation plan. This plan will help us answer critical questions. How should we prepare France at +4 degrees? How must we transform our infrastructure to withstand extreme heat, floods, and repeated natural disasters? And to ensure no one is left behind, how can we better protect those most at risk, often middle and working classes? For the environmental transition to be inclusive, we must also build the infrastructure that enables French people to change their habits, such as in their mobility choices. Today, France boasts over 37,000 kilometers of bicycle lanes and almost 24,000 kilometers green path for non-motorized vehicles and pedestrians. We now also have 2 million charging stations for electric vehicles. This is 4 times the number we had in 2021. We must also embed sufficiency in the conception of our infrastructure. We need to learn using just the resources we need, no more, no less. This lesson became clear during the energy crisis, but sufficiency applies equally to water, raw materials, land, etc. Reflecting on your work, I also agree that each investment must undergo a stress test similar to the 5A test you promote. And in a way, this is what we are doing with our climate energy strategy. We conducted a large consultation involving a great number of experts, NGOs, trade unions, elected representatives. The point here is to build acceptability. We ensured our energy production capacities and their evolution through our multi-annual energy plan will meet our needs. This is availability. We built our plan pursuing our goal of achieving climate neutrality by 2050. This is adequacy. We placed great importance on the availability of the information and data underlying our plan. This is accessibility. And finally, in our green transition, we substantially support our citizens to renovate their homes, switch to cleaner vehicles, and access public transportation. And this is affordability. I think this 5A test is a good way to know if we are heading towards the right direction. Our final crucial point regarding the topic of the day. If we want our green policies to leave no one behind, we must focus and prioritize our public support. You refer in your work to the teachings of the Indian Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen and his capabilities approach. According to Sen, the idea that poverty is a deprivation of freedom is not obvious. It can be understood by comparing, as he does, the situation of 2 people, one fasting and the other malnourished. From the point of view of resources, both are in the same situation. But what makes the difference is that one has chosen not to eat, while the other had no other choice. Thus, the aim of politics is to increase the realm of possibilities of choice. Regarding environmental transition, our goal must be to allow everyone to build the capability to make their own transition. We should prioritize our support to middle class and working people who sometimes feel overlooked by public policies. Many of these people don't understand why we are subsidizing electric cars for wealthy people who have the means to afford them without assistance. And they are right. To make ecological planning succeed, we must collectively rethink the economic model underpinning our infrastructure. Today, not all of it is profitable. That is why we should foster public-private cooperation. This is also why we need to target more effectively where public funding is really needed. A very recent study made by France Stratégie shows that today, 13% of low-carbon investments are already profitable, with projections suggesting this will rise to 52% in 2030. Our role is to target effectively where government money can make the difference in enabling the investment. And as we go along and investments become profitable without our help, we need to step back progressively. In those difficult budgetary times, it is crucial. We also need to improve our assessment of the cost of inaction, not only financially, but socially. Missing the turning point in green and inclusive infrastructure and industry could trigger a new wave of disindustrialization with lasting impacts for individuals, jobs, regions, and inequalities. I would just like to conclude by saying that you must have noticed that I've talked about the conditions of success and inclusiveness for the ecological transition in France. However, I'm aware that the topic of this day extends far beyond our national context. I don't have time to elaborate, but it is obvious we must also ensure the development of the right infrastructure in emerging countries. That was exactly the point of the Paris Summit for the Planet and the People, to launch an agenda that enabled this financing. It is one of the main points we work on in the different COPs, giving the resources for the South countries' population to be fully included in the transition. And when I talk about the South countries, I talk about the most vulnerable countries, not the emerging countries that are building the capacities and capabilities to manage their own transition. I could go on and on about this topic, but I don't want to be too long. Thanks again for your work on those crucial matters and for having me this morning. Have a productive day of exchanges and debates. Thank you very much.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Minister, for that fantastic speech. I'm Matthew Bishop. I'm moderating the next two panel discussions. And I would like to welcome the first panel up on stage, please. We have on this panel Javier Gier, EDF Executive Senior Vice President, Batul Hassoun, CEO of the Salmon Consulting Group. Please come and take a seat. Laurent Travisiani, Deputy Managing Director of SNCF, Henri Glaser, Director of Sodexo Group, and Wilfried Sand-Zantman, Professor of Economics and Head of the Economics Department at ESSEC Business School. So our topic this morning is to understand the meaning of inclusive infrastructure, which is the subject of this fantastic report that is published today by Ultimind and InfraVision, this welcome new think tank on infrastructure that has been launched the last few months. So the report, I think, makes very clear that we need to view infrastructure very differently from a social perspective than we've done in the past, and that we need to get away from, I think, the traditional assumption that infrastructure was just something, if you spent on it, it would inevitably benefit society, to a world where we're much more intentional about how do we ensure that that infrastructure spending genuinely produces a better society for everybody. You know, and I think this probably in history goes back a long way. We can think of phrases like the wrong side of the tracks, which really gets to the heart of the fact that where you put infrastructure can have meaningful effects on access to places, We've had digital deserts. We've now had food deserts talked about, which all are a consequence of infrastructure not done with intentionality around its inclusivity. So I'm going to start by asking each of our panelists to offer a definition of inclusive infrastructure. So I'm going to start with Wilfried. How would you define or frame the concept of infrastructure, of inclusive infrastructure, and why is it important in today's world?
Can you hear me well? Okay. Thanks, Matthew, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. First, in fact, it's not an easy question because it may seem surprising to many of you, but there is no very clear or unanimous definition of what is an infrastructure or what is inclusivity. But I would say that inclusive infrastructure is a structuring project for well-being of society that takes into account the impact on some disadvantaged groups, either in its purpose or its direct or indirect consequences, or, and maybe we'll come back to that point later on, the way it is financed. So as for its importance, I would say, well, of course, it's something like it's important for the cohesion of society, but for me, it's also the ability of decision makers, public and private, to create fair opportunities for all, and so basically to support success wherever it may come from. And I think this is, without this ability to support success, and of course infrastructure is really about supporting activities, it's very hard to hope for any form of progress and, let's say, well-being for people.
Why do you feel it's become such a hot topic today?
I'm sorry?
Why has it become so relevant today?
Well, I think there were like different stages when you look at infrastructure. Sometimes first we're just looking at values, like monetary values, job created, and then probably we start integrating like environmental issues. And then, as the minister said, we said, well, it's nice, but even if you create value and you create huge inequalities, you have backlash. And then we really need to take this into account in every aspect of our decision.
I'll pass the mic to Batul. Same question to you.
Yeah, so maybe I would like to come back to the definition of inclusion and not inclusive infrastructure first. So inclusion for me is respecting all diversities, but if you stop there, you have done only the halfway to the solution. You need to respect all diversity, but you also need them to be able to speak up. To be respected only is not enough. And there is a quote that I quite like. It's not from me, it's from the diversity and inclusion director from Netflix, I think, saying that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing like nobody is watching. And I think that if we want to have a really inclusive infrastructure, we need people to be able to use this infrastructure without being noticed, without asking for something special because they are different. And if we achieve that, then we have inclusive infrastructure, I think.
Thank you. Javier, from an industrial perspective, what does it mean for you, inclusive infrastructure, and how are you seeing a change in the mood around this?
Well, from an operational point of view, I mean, developing an operational and inclusive infrastructure means definitely first to mitigate the negative impact that an infrastructure first have on a specific area. I mean, when you develop an infrastructure, you cannot do that without having an impact. So it's very important to be very open to, of course, the local communities, to have the good debate levels, to take into consideration all the consequences on the communities and on the biodiversity. So, which means that design is key. It means that discussion is key, inclusion with local communities is key, construction phase is key, financing is key, operational is key, and regulation is also key. Because, as the minister said, I mean, the 5 A's test requires all these 5 of these different levels of focus. And from an operational point of view, very clearly, today, it's not possible at all, and this is a great thing, to develop any infrastructure without focusing on these different points.
Thank you. Enoric, same question to you.
So,
What is quite interesting, the different aspects evocated is that notion of common link between the different situations and evolutions. And I would say for a service industry perspective, there's a key point also, which is that notion of anchorage in a territory, which is a key point also to create a real link between what we can call the local communities, the public and private actors, the product and consumers also, and also that notion of local stakeholders, which means inhabitants, associative structure, and partners to consider the local demographic specificities that it was also evocated by the minister. In today's world, we sometimes speak about place of destination for newly created infrastructure, such as building, for example. I would say that perhaps we should now speak about useful living place of destination, including that notion of equal access that benefits to all, and considering all inhabitants in that notion. This step is quite necessary in perpetuating the notion of development for communities, but also for territories and for companies. And for us in Sodexo, we work on three main pillars on this point, which are the ecological transition, the employment for people in territories, but also that notion of health through food solutions that we can make. Those three pillars are some points, a kind of answer to that notion of future inclusive infrastructure.
And lastly, Laurent.
yeah. So for SNCF, I think that the main point and the key point is that the railway infrastructure will be access to all the people in all the territories. And I think it's not easy, but I think it's our main goal. And just to illustrate that, I just note three crucial points. First one, when we take the population, I think that 30% of this population don't access as they want to the railway station or to the railway's mode of transport. So we have to reduce what I can call the mobility precarity. And I think it's our main goal in the transport sector is to reduce mobility precarity. The second point is about what we can call the disabled people. When we take all the disability levels, we can note that in the French population, you have around between 10 and 12 millions of people who are disabled people. And so our responsibility is to be sure that these people have access to public transport, railways or other, in all the country, on all the territories. And I think that it's crucial to be sure that all the people in our country, in our territories, have access to the public transport and to railways infrastructure.
Thank you. So that's the high-level definition. We want to now go deeper into what actually delivering inclusive infrastructure involves. And I want to start with you, Wilfried. This report makes a very good job of spelling out the academic debate about infrastructure investing, and I think it shows that a macro level spending on infrastructure does translate into higher GDP, at least for a while, and can have other social benefits. But what do you take from as an economist, what do you take from the literature about how we can design infrastructure, what we need to do to design inclusive infrastructure?
The thing is that there are many types of infrastructure, I would say. Some of them are a bit inclusive by design. I mean, they are meant to help the disadvantaged people. Other, they will have they will meet the need of disadvantaged people, purpose. But quite often, I mean, especially in the old days, but still now, you have projects which have like a global importance, like for growth, but they do not have inclusivity at first as an objective. So, I mean, they can be helpful to help some territories, but I mean, they didn't really look at that. They look at, let's say, growth. Okay, so I said before, it was the traditional way, the top-down decisions. Okay, and then now we try to incorporate the impact, just like free trade, the example which was given by the minister before, on like other groups, not looking at global impact, but local like local impact on particular groups. And then the question is, how do we take this seriously into account? So what do we do when you have projects creating global value, but disrupting the life of some groups which are already discriminated against, in a sense? So the question is, how much weight globally do we want to put on these people? How do we decide to transform projects, or maybe to cancel them? Okay, and so of course there is no single answer. But I think the first step that we are doing now is taking this seriously into account. And I think, so in our project, we will have this debate, how much weight in the social welfare function that we have, okay, should we put on those things? So before, we're not thinking about that. Okay, now we think more about environment, as it has been said, on those people. And so I think in the long run, it's going to be good for acceptability, but also for well-being.
And are you already seeing evidence that that way of thinking is having a positive effect on the kind of infrastructure investment that happens?
Well, I see it has an impact on a bit on length of infrastructure, how time it will take. But I hope, I'm thinking about the high-speed train between Toulouse and Bordeaux, for example, when there is some debate. I live most of the time in Toulouse, and then we know that there are some impact on local travelers. People are discussing a lot, but I hope that at the end of the day, the level of acceptability in the long run will be much higher.
Xavier, you mentioned in your opening comment the design stage, and I wonder what you're seeing in terms of how the design process, you know, is evolving to focus more on inclusivity. And I guess picking up Wilfred's point, is that happening in a way that could increase this, maybe the speed of decision making rather than prolong it indefinitely, as seems to be the case with so many of these big projects now, certainly in Europe and Britain, I think.
Well, you're right to focus on this point, because I mean, I think that a key point in inclusivity is to make the decision in order to help everybody to benefit from the positive impacts of the infrastructures, because an infrastructure cannot exist if it doesn't bring a positive impact. I mean, transportation, water, electricity, any kind of infrastructure brings a positive impact. But the question here is, to whom does it bring this positive impact? And are there some communities or some people, categories of people who are suffering from that? So I think it's very important, once more, to take into consideration these key point at the different levels of stage of the project. In particular, just take an example. For example, when you develop a hydroelectrical project, of course, you will overflow some spaces, some villages. Sometimes you have to take that into consideration in order, of course, to propose a resettlement program, to propose a development program, to, of course, take also into consideration biodiversity impact. So this is key. And then you have also to set both your price and regulation in order to make everybody benefit from the electricity that will be brought by this hydroelectric system. For example, we've developed one of them in Laos 15 years ago in Namtön, and this was a key point, and we were absolutely dedicated to go beyond the public references that are set by World Bank or Asian Development Bank about that. The point that you've raised is a bit different, but it's key also. It's the length of the decision making. Because when, and as I said, we take into consideration all the needs and voices of the different communities, this requires some time. And the question then is to find the right balance between this absolutely key phase, and on the other hand, the necessity to decide as quick as possible, to be in a position to give some visibility to industrial companies which have to manage their roadmap and their order intake. And so that's why it's also a key point, because it's important to give voice to the communities and to give visibility to industrial companies to bring their people to the project. So it's a key point for inclusivity, sorry, which is not enough taken into consideration. And today we have more and more projects which are too lengthy, which of course as a consequence are too costly, which has a negative impact to inclusivity, also because of that. So it's important to work also on that, which means that it's important to work on the process of communication and of dialogue in order to have it very efficient, very in-depth, but also not too long in order to enable decision making.
And Laurent, the same question to you, as you alluded to greater pressure to take account of inclusivity in your planning processes and design. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, I can say the same question and the same comments from Xavier. The length for the infrastructure projects is quite long, sometimes too long. And I think that companies into the group like SNCF Réseau and SNCF Gare Connexion face more and more social issues, oppositions, and we have to integrate that into the management of a project. And I give you perhaps two examples. One which is called the project CDG Express, which is the implementation of a service between Paris and Charles de Gaulle. And you perhaps noticed that Paris is one of the megalopoles into the world who has no direct service between the airport and the center of the town. And initially, we determine a project, and we have the goal to open the service before the Olympic Games. You see, the Olympic Games are behind us, and the service will be opened, I think, in 2027. 3 years, a delay of 3 years, and which is due to no operational explanation, but only the oppositions of a project and the ability just to manage these oppositions and to be sure that we can deliver the project. And so I think that we have to integrate this subject into a management like a project like CDG Express, but we have also to maintain the cap and not to forget the public interest, which is to open such a service. And so it's not an easy point, but I think that we have to anticipate more and more the discussions, the consultation with all the stakeholders in front of, at the beginning of a project and just before we launch this type of project and this type of infrastructure.
If I think back to my experience growing up in Britain, I mean, the infrastructure projects, would often be designed top down, and then they would be rolled out and announced, and then the community would complain and protest, and so that would be a source of delay. I mean, do you see an opportunity by integrating those who are going to be affected and using the infrastructure right at the start, that can accelerate?
I think that we have to change our management of this type of project. We have to be more open and to launch discussions, consultations, a long time before this project, to be sure that the stakeholders understand the public interest of such a project. But I think it's a way perhaps to reduce the oppositions. I think that we can't eliminate all the oppositions of this type of project.
Enoig, this report talks about the just transition on climate and how you can simultaneously achieve a transition to more inclusive infrastructure and more sustainable infrastructure. And last year we had the whole report on the circular economy and infrastructure. I think there's been a lot of focus on the E of ESG over the last few years. Are you seeing more focus now on giving meaning and clarity to the S, and how much is inclusivity part of that?
I think that's really a good question and an actual point in our society. In fact, yes, the S standing for at the same time social and societal. I would say and precise those both aspects. And that's quite interesting to see the definition of ESG that has changed through the years. And perhaps some people didn't know what to say about that notion of S. But now we can really say that social and societal at the same time. Yes, it's gaining traction. But firstly, it's gaining traction because regulations are changing at the same time. And we are facing great challenges such as employment or unemployment in some industries, nutrition problem in our society, and that notion of inclusion that was already said. It's changing because also regulators and people want more deeply impacting and involved company in that change in society. It was quite the same process for the environmental track record, especially on the carbon footprint as one of the main key points, which is again actually mentioned. But now we have in Europe the coming CSRD regulation that is now arriving, and which will have a great impact on the way we have to define the business model and the visibility of the social and societal actions we may have as company and as responsible in our societies. So that's quite interesting to have that deep interest on workers, on local communities, and also on consumer expectations as we are industrial or service structure. It's really an opportunity in terms of business for everyone. We all have to consider that it's an opportunity to deal with that notion of changing some business models, including sometimes local aspects with employment solutions, with nutrition, workout, or elements impacting local people, and at the same time for the strategic dimension, saying that the company has an impact on also regulators and the encourage in territories. But I think that a lot of companies have to do more and can do more. We can do more. And that point of the S for us in Sodexo is quite important, as we are a great French employer with more than 400,000 employees in the world, serving a day 100 million meals in the world, which is quite huge. So that notion of social track is quite important. And we may ask 2 points. First, in terms of employment, how can we do more in terms of employment solutions, innovating and being more inclusive, and finding other solutions for facing another point of that nutrition, for example. How can we find new solutions to provide healthy food, not only for our consumers, but I would say for all communities that are surrounding our activities as business leaders.
So Batul, I think as the report last year showed, about 75% of carbon emissions can be traced back to infrastructure of various kinds. And so I think as attention has focused on that, and how do we transition to a new energy economy, how do we reduce those emissions coming from infrastructure? Has that focus overwhelmed the focus on S and inclusivity, and how do we actually make these two things synergistic?
Yeah. I think that we definitely focused on the E of ESG for a long time, and it was necessary probably. You were talking about the fact that when we build infrastructure, we have a positive impact by design, which is also true. But what we need to do now, the next step, I think, is to manage to think in a systemic way. Because if you do something well for the planet, but it's too expensive, it doesn't work. So E and S and G goes hands in hands. And I think that there is one model that I quite like, which is the do not economy from Kate Rowers, that explains that when you think about your company and how you want, or your city, I think Amsterdam has used this model, you need to think about solutions that will both at the same time prevent everyone from falling into the social hole, meaning that you don't have equality between gender, equality, access to decent work, and so on and so on. But you also need to don't go beyond the planet limits, and I think that this model is quite interesting. And the focus in organization were on the planet, but more and more, and I'm working with a lot of companies, they are coming back to the S. And the new question I'm hearing from my clients are, how can I make it robust on the long term and performant on the long term? I need to think about the S, to think about the fair wages, for example. We've seen Michelin with the decent wage, for example, that was working on that, but also on providing to my employees quality of life at work. So, for example, mental health is one of the new questions raising for HR people, for example. So we are seeing more and more S questions arising, and I think it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of industries have been focusing more on the S question and inclusivity around infrastructure. And I wanted to talk about some practical examples that you've each been involved in that can sort of show us the challenges and the opportunities. I want to start with Xavier. I mean, all around the world, reliable access to energy, remains quite a big problem. And even in France, you have 3.3 million people that are exposed to energy insecurity. What sort of initiatives have you been taking at EDF to address that? What have you learned?
Yeah, I think that we've learned a lot during the last years, in fact, in France, and in particular in 22, in a context in which prices went extraordinarily high, and we were also lacking electricity. So it was a crucial moment at which this tension appeared in France, particular. What we've learned, is first that it's very important to focus on people who cannot pay their bill. And for example, we've decided no longer to cut electricity, to cut power to people who cannot pay their bill. So we reduce, of course, their ability to consume, but we do no longer cut power. It's a decision that we've taken as a company, and of course, it's not in our economic interest, but it's definitely a decision that we've taken in order to assume this inclusivity of this infrastructure, which is electricity. Second point is that in such circumstances, it's also very important that the state reacts and takes proper decisions. And this has been the case, for example, in France, via the what we've called the bouclier tarifaire, the tariff shield, that had been decided at that time, which gave the opportunity to people not to pay the market price. Of course, bills went very high, but nevertheless, when you compare the price that have been paid by the French people, or French consumers, versus the other countries' consumers, French consumers have been protected by this decision taken by the public authorities, which was very important, very key in this crucial moment. The third point, maybe to highlight, is that in France we also benefit of a specific regulation which is called tariff equalization. So it's not dedicated to people, to poor people, or to people who have difficulties to pay their bill, but the goal of this specific regulation is to give access to anybody everywhere at the same tariff to electricity. And this is also very important because, when you consider our national community, it's very important that you pay the same price here at the heart of Paris, or if you live in a remote area or in the mountains or anywhere, even if the cost of generation or of supply is higher, you will pay the same price. So this is very, very important also. And maybe last but not least, I think it's very important also to find the right balance between market solutions and regulation. Because, of course, we all know that you could have people saying, okay, it's very easy, just let the market play and everything will rebalance itself. And on the other hand, you could have also people saying, very easy, just set a fixed price as low as possible, and everybody will be able to access electricity. And in fact, none of these two solutions work in the long run, because if you only think that the market will solve everything, many people will fall apart. And if you think that regulation can give a long-term solution, in fact, there is such a high risk that there is no capacity to finance necessary regulation, no capacity to hire competent people and to pay them with decent wage, etc., etc. So these two extreme solutions have negative impacts. What's important, I think, is to find a right balance, and so to give a necessary space to the market, but also to give some regulation in order to protect the poorest and to protect also against specific market movements. And for example, in 14 months from now, 1st of January 26, we will enter in France a new regulation scheme, what we call the AREN, which is a mechanism by which EDF has to sell part of its nuclear generated electricity to its competitor will come to an end. And last year, we found an agreement with the state on the basis of which, from the 1st of January 26, you will have a marketplace, which means that EDF is committed to sign mid and long-term contracts with its consumers. And of course, this gives some room to the market. But on top of that, there is also a taxation mechanism which has been set, which beyond a certain level of price and revenues will enable the public authorities to tax EDF, if this is the case in the market in the months and years to come, and to redistribute that to consumers in order to guarantee that everybody will pay a fair price. This is a kind of mechanism which balances market and regulation, which I think is very appropriate.
Laurent, similar question to you about SNCF. How are you thinking about, what's your current thinking about reducing these social-spatial inequalities that exist?
Reducing social disparities, I think, is at the heart of the DNA of the group, SNCF. First, the railways activities, I think, increase the connectivity of the people and the territories into the country. I think also that the main goal or main subject of the group for the railways activity is the daily trip, so the daily activity. And I think it's quite important for people just to have access to daily trips and very good daily trips. And I give you perhaps an example. And we have the project to develop what we call in French les SERM, which is the Metropolitan Express Regional Services. And these services will offer in the future multimodal services inside metropole like Lyon, Marseille, Bordeaux, Lille, and so on, but not only inside this metropole, but around the metropole. And so I think that it increases the quality of the service, which is delivered to people who live in this city, in the suburbs, and also in the city, the small city around the metropole. And it needs around, I think, perhaps 20 billion euros. But I think it's quite a very big project to increase the quality of the service, so to decrease the social disparity for the transport of these people in the future.
Thank you. Anyway, you talked about the huge number of meals that you deliver, but you also are thinking about the urban ecosystems in which you do that. And I wonder if you could particularly talk about the work you've been doing around employment creation.
Yes, because that notion of social is part of our DNA, as I explained that before, and that's why we created the La Passerelle structure, La Passerelle Sodexo company, which is our first social innovation project dedicated to impact in territories. And we opened our first, I would say, the pilot site in Seine-Saint-Denis. Why in Seine-Saint-Denis? Because Seine-Saint-Denis is a specific department with huge social dynamics, with items like the poorest department in France, the youngest department in France, and the INSEE Institute said in 2022 that it will remain it till the 2070. Which is quite huge, and also a department that has 25% of unemployment. So that notion of tracking the impact is key when you arrive in a territory, and it has driven the way we thought about the concept of the passerelle as a social structure. And we constructed a building with 4 different spaces, which is really a social hub, with a processing plant for vegetables at the ground that offers employment to people to residents of Clichy-sous-Bois. Also a daycare facility with 21 child places inside the building, mainly dedicated to deliver one of the main breaks to employment, and especially for local women. A training room for the young people from 16 to 25, run by a public structure, to offer them the way of getting a real view of training programs till the end, which are long-term jobs, and also a special space that where we can run training in terms of nutrition or other aspects for not only for our consumers but also for the local people and inhabitants to help them get better elements. So the building has also been because you talked about the design. It's also an eco-design building with a low carbon footprint, with gardens on the roof, because it was key for us to be sure that we come in that surroundings with also a positive building impact and infrastructure impact for the people living in the surroundings there. So that's a key point. And through this, we developed with the passerelle structure a new employment path that we work with also France Travail. I would say the first part, finding the right people, informing them about a new training with technical support, and then in the end a long-term contract as part of the process, which is quite new, having the long-term contract including in the training process. And to finalize that point, the way that we are working on the impact has been labelized as a ESUS label recently in last September, which means that we are on a real positive gaining impact for our territory where we are running the project.
Great. Batul, you have a barometer of biodiversity, of diversity, sorry. Can you talk a bit about how you like your clients to use that?
Yeah, definitely. In France, we have a problem. We say that we can't measure diversity and from origins. We always say that. And we know that we can say we want to build inclusive infrastructure, for example, but if we are not inclusive in our own company, it's complex. And if you don't measure things, you can't improve things. So we decided to create this barometer 3 years ago. We created it with the Club 21e siècle, my association, and McKinsey was also very helpful. And the idea was really to say, okay, in Anglo-Saxon world, you can measure ethnicity. You can ask people their races or their ethnicity. It's okay. In France, you can't. So French companies were not measuring. The idea was to find another way to do it, and that was legal, obviously. And we find it because we decided to ask people to. So we measured this diversity not just at the lower level of a company, because usually in all your companies you have diversity at the lower levels. But what we want is also to have diversity at the top level, because if you want really to be inclusive, to take decision, not only fast decision, but also good decision, you need to be diverse. We know that diversity brings performance. So we decided to ask people about their nationality, the nationality of their parents and grandparents. And it's a proxy to reconstruct the origins of our staff. We also ask people about their socio-economic backgrounds and their diploma. And with all these learnings, we managed to find that companies, French-rooted companies, CAC 40 and so on, has some diversity, but not enough at the top level, and work still need to be done. But the good news is that now we have a tool, you can use it. So we have just launched revealed the results of the second edition 2 weeks ago. The next edition will be launched next year. So if you want to participate, you're very welcome.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're pretty near the end of the panel. So what I'm going to do is just ask each of you to end with a suggestion for one priority that you would like to see infrastructure investors and companies focus on over the next year. In the report, there's this sort of excellent 5 A's framework that is described, which is about. So the 5 A's are acceptability, adequacy, availability, accessibility, and affordability. And these 5 A's, I think, as a framing for all the questions that need to be thought about, seem to me very good. I just quite like also our panelists as we go down the line to quickly comment on that 5 A's framework and then give us that one piece of the most pressing challenge that you would like to see infrastructure people focus on to promote inclusivity. Start with you, Wilfred.
Okay, very briefly. So it's very hard to disagree with those principles. So when we stick to principles, everyone agrees. But then, if we really restrict to infrastructures that tick 5 boxes, then we will be eliminating some projects. I mean, quite a few. And even if we stick to these principles, then we will have some questions. Think about acceptability. Okay, we're talking about the project, the CDG Express or others. So what is exactly acceptability? Is it everyone in all groups? Is it the majority of groups? Is it the majority in each group? Or if we think about affordability, do you want to have free usage for some? Then you have crop subsidies, and it's problematic, you need price discrimination, or you need public funds, and we know it's in short supply. So I think principles is a good compass. Okay, but we can't expect that we're going to meet all objectives. So we have to think about compensations. Compensations can be in terms of direct compensations or trying to find projects that also includes local communities. So if I think about CDG Express or the high-speed trains between Toulouse and Bordeaux, we have to think about, okay, we do something for international travelers, but can we do at the same time something for local travelers? And it's going to help promoting big projects and making sure that small communities are not negatively affected.
Great, Laurent.
I think that the key point is the acceptability, not perhaps by all the people, but the great majority of the people and the communities. I think it's the key point. So to be sure that this acceptability is reached, I think that we have to perhaps to anticipate more the projects first. I think it's a question. Perhaps to imagine the compensation, and I think all the type of compensation that you can imagine. It's not only economic compensation, and I think also that we don't have to forget the public interest of this type of project, and we have to explain that. We have to explain that more and more. And I think it's not an easy point, an easy subject, but I think that we have to explain more and more the public interest and the long-term vision of these projects. And if we don't have a long-term vision, it's difficult to imagine, to implement such a project, such infrastructure project.
Thank you. Again, we're running a bit short on time. So
yeah.
thank you.
Quickly, I would say that Thank you. I would say that sometimes we may not think about difficulties, but more in terms of opportunities. And that notion of accessibility for any new infrastructure has to be thought with the global context and integration and impacts in terms of territories. That's one of the best way to integrate also the people surroundings in huge projects such as roads or whatever, and even buildings, and thinking that what are the positive impacts that we will have this new infrastructure, new solution that we are arriving with, not only for our direct stakeholders, but also for all the different stakeholders in the community. That's another way of thinking the business, because it involves a lot of great opportunities also for the companies in terms of positive impacts.
Great. Balu.
Yeah, maybe if we want to build inclusive infrastructure, we need to take off the biases. But actually, we can't be unbiased as a people. So maybe the right way to go forward is to integrate diversity. So you can have many biases, but at the end, if we are diverse, these are not the same bias, so it will solve the problem. And maybe a second thing is that we need also to change the way we measure performance, I think.
And last word to you, Harry.
Well, I mean, I really think that accessibility and affordability are key. I mean, and we see all the political consequences of investment which would not be accessible to everybody. To everybody and affordable for everybody. And I really think that it's a key key challenge, both for operational companies as EDF and as are many other companies, in order to be very efficient to deliver the best infrastructure at the best price. Secondly, with the funds, with the financing providers, and for that I would like also to thank Vauban and Mathieu and Altermine for this work, because it highlights the necessary to work all together in order to reach these goals. Because in the years or decades that we've already, in the past 2 decades, you've seen many projects for which the profit, in fact, has been captured by investors, and this is not good neither. So it's very important to be reasonable also as regards cost of financing, return to investors. And third key stakeholder is also the state, because it's very important that in order to help emerge some infrastructure, to make some infrastructure emerge, it's very important that the state, be also in some cases the insurer of last resort, because there are some risks that cannot be assumed by private investors and that have to be assumed by the state. So I really think that these operational companies, funds, state are key in order to give accessibility and affordability.
Thank you, and I think that was a very wide-ranging discussion that very much reinforces, I think, the findings of this report. I'd like to thank all the panelists for the discussion, and I'm going to, before we do that, we're going to leave the stage now for 2 inspirational speeches. The first, I think, is by the English designer Sadie Morgan, who I know from conversation over dinner last night is a very innovative thinker and an impressive leader of change, who's on Britain's National Infrastructure Council, among many other things. So a big thank you to the panel, and over to Sadie.
Thank you. Oh, there's the clicker. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. I cannot believe that I've just sat through an incredible panel where people are talking about great design and inclusivity, something that is absolutely close to my heart. I'm going to whiz through 4 projects in the hope that I just give you a little bit of a flavour, not only of what I do, but of how I hope, been able to influence UK government and others. Sorry, I need to go back. There we go. in relation to the importance of good design and inclusivity. The first thing I want to say is how absolutely wonderful it was when the RIBA Sterling Prize was given and awarded to Crossrail. Crossrail is an extraordinary project, I think, that has come to fruition. It is completely accessible top to bottom from every station, not only in London, but throughout its extensive trajectory. And I think a great example of how great design, when it's thought about early on, can transform our infrastructure. I wanted to talk first of all about a project that I was involved in, sort of professional as an architect. This was not only an extraordinary project in terms of its relation to its context, but also the people that involved. And I think when we heard Agnes speak earlier, she said what really matters when you're talking about inclusivity is actually people. And I don't think we can make inclusive infrastructure unless we really understand who we're delivering it for. And in that context, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the importance of communication and how we design and deliver our infrastructure for people. And I think one of the things that I took from the panel earlier on was actually if you're not inclusive from the beginning, then actually the long-term consequences of not having that level of communication can be catastrophic. Because if you make infrastructure that people don't really want or understand the importance of, I think that we end up with long delays and potentially, I think, an infrastructure that is not inclusive in relation to the actual, the sort of within its context and people. Hastings Pier was one of a project that we took on about 10 years ago. We actually won the Sterling Prize for this. It was, I think, before Crossrail, one of the only projects in the UK, non-architectural project that won the Sterling Prize. How do you take a project for a community that needs to sort of be reborn from a catastrophic fire? How do you consult with 10,000 people within a community of Hastings? Well, you do that, I think, we learned through a lot of time and energy early on put into those conversations. And if you're an architect and you are looking to have a great brief, you need a great brief that is written and inclusive by those people who are going to be using it. Which all sounds incredibly wonderful until you realise that there are 10,000 different understandings and wishes that come from asking those questions. So it's all very well asking those questions, but sometimes you either get way too many answers or you get answers that you're not entirely sure as to how to sort of collate together in order to turn into a realistic brief. So with 10,000 different wishes from the community, we decided actually that the one thing that we shouldn't do is actually build a building. What we should do was lay the foundations in order that there was a space and a creative opportunity for lots of different things to happen, so creative, flexible space. So we put nearly all the money that we had into making a serviceable deck in order that the community could then use that facility, use that piece of infrastructure as they saw fit. We recycled a lot of the wood and the timber that was used and that was prone to the fire. And so it was a project that completely recycled most of the timber here on the cladding of what was a small events space. But in general, the whole of the pier was given back to the community. And it has this incredible spirit to it. This pier, I think, has, when you go there, it has an energy that comes from a source of a community who really believed in it, who put their energy and effort into trying to help and compose a brief that they felt a part of. And I think if communities feel a part of a project, then that long-term stewardship, that long-term belief and usage of that piece of infrastructure is something that you cannot underestimate. And a pride that comes with our infrastructure, I think, is also incredibly important. How do we encourage that sense of pride in the infrastructure that we build? We talked a little bit about frameworks. One of the things that I do, I sit on the National Infrastructure Commission. I also sit on the Board of Homes England, two institutions which need to come together if we're going to solve our housing crisis in one way. But I'm also very interested in how our infrastructure improves the quality of our lives. And so 6 years ago, I went a little bit frustrated about the way in which we were designing and delivering our infrastructure and our built environment in relation to more just about aesthetics than to actually how does it improve people's quality of life. And I went and raised some money, and we set about doing a national piece of communication and research to find out what it was about people's environment that actually improved their quality of life. And we set a foundation up that not only looks and works around those impactful principles, but also does post-occupancy evaluation and works with governments and universities to encourage those within our built environment to think about a set of principles that really do make a difference. There's no surprises here. Sense of control. People want to feel that they have a sense of control about what is being done to them. They want to be involved with projects and project work. Health. We want to live in healthy spaces. We want homes that are healthy. We want environments that are healthy. Access to nature. We need to be able to feel, to enjoy our environment, whether or not we're in an urban or a rural setting. Sense of fun and wonder. It's not just kids who need a good time. We all need to feel that we are living life to the full, and we need to encourage that through culture and through ways in which we can express that sense of joy, freedom of movement, and a sense of belonging. Community is key. Community is key in terms of improving the quality of our lives. And one of the things that we've learned throughout the process in the research that we've been doing is actually that there is no standard for consultation in the UK. So we undertook a 2-year piece of research to actually set some standards for community consultation. So everybody says, oh yes, we talk to our stakeholders. But everybody does it in a different way, and everybody marks their own homework. So it's very, very difficult to understand how and what is best practice. So we did a huge piece of work, 2 years of work, to come up with a set of proposals that help us really understand and embed those principles and ways of asking communities how to get involved. One of those things is digital mapping, and a big project that we've been involved in Harlow and Gilston, 16,000 new homes and infrastructure. Well, if you ask people early on and you understand what it is about their environment that improves their quality of life before you start a project, then you're already on the front foot. So if you can map that and then go back over time, which is what we're now doing. So first of all, we mapped by working with digital and face-to-face consultation what it was about people's environment, what it was about their communities, what it was about their local context that improved their quality of life. We then go back over time using post-occupancy evaluation. We overlay that with socio-economic data, and we can begin to understand if those interventions that we make are making a difference, are improving people's quality of life, because we can now judge economic performance, we can judge how many more children go to school, what the poverty lines are, and various other things. So actually we're now beginning to have a much better understanding of how and what it is within our local communities and the interventions that we make that improve people's quality of life. One of the other things I do is chair the independent design panel for High Speed 2. So we are a critical friend to HS2, and we have a group of people who are there to help and advise in terms of how HS2 delivers on its design vision. And the reason I want to talk a little bit about this project is because it's this is about how you communicate big infrastructure projects. And I think when we heard earlier, the panel was saying it's all very well, but you know, there are a lot of contradictions when you need to ask people their opinions, when you need to do something anyway. But how do you do that? How do you mitigate the effects of what it is that you're doing? And what I wanted to talk to you about was an initiative we brought forward through the design panel, which is called a specimen design. So in the belief that if you get it right early on, if you can get the planning process smooth, the Schedule 17s, then you don't get delays, costly delays to time and programme. So actually getting it right from the beginning can be long-term, give you long-term success. And if you rewind back to the Hastings Pier example, I think long-term sense of ownership and pride in your infrastructure. This is what went through the parliamentary process. So if you know anything about the way that the UK operates, this is the point at which local communities go, we don't want that. And I have to say, I'm on record saying if it's designed and delivered like that, I'm going to throw myself off of it. So I actually had to do something about it. So what did we do? We set up a parallel process of a specimen design. So Knight Architects came on board, and at the time of procurement, when the civils contractors were being given just a set of notes, a specification, a written specification, we said, no, they need to have a physical, visual specification, because we need to tell them and show them what the minimal viable project actually looks like and what our expectations are. So the local community worked with Knight Architects to design and deliver a specimen design to cost and to budget. This is the Colne Valley Viaduct in construction at the moment. The Colne Valley Viaduct at present is 20% less carbon than it was at the early stages. It has just delivered one of the biggest natural chalk embankments by reconstituting and reusing a lot of the spoil from the construction works, all because of the conversations and the early on intervention of engineers, landscape designers, and a consortium of thoughtful consultants who were able to make significant change. I think that also goes for how we embed our infrastructure within context. And if we do so in a way that says, actually, we connect those existing pathways, we're thinking hard about not disconnecting the infrastructure that we make within not only our urban context, but our rural context, we really begin to, I think, make an infrastructure that not is only inclusive, but is contextual. It fits with its environment, and it is, I think, mitigates, as many of those have said before, the design and the design and production of our infrastructure, and that has to happen right from the early stages. So I think when we talk about inclusivity, we also have to understand that that belongs right from the beginning, from the awareness of a journey, not only through the step-free access of the design and delivery of our stations, but post-travel and door-to-door. So when we talk about inclusive architecture and infrastructure, we have to do so, I think, in a way that is from start to finish, and thinks about how, when we look originally at our infrastructure, we're not designing and delivering an infrastructure which is car-based. We're not thinking about delivering a national piece of high-speed linkage and then just taking us off in cars. and buses, but we're thinking of ways to integrate and humanize the beginning and the end of our journeys. I think I'm going to end on the principles that the National Infrastructure Commission has put in place. One of the things, as the youngest commissioner of the National Infrastructure Commission, set up to advise government on the next 30 to 50 years of our infrastructure strategy, realising that I was the youngest and that we'd all probably be dead in 30 years, that actually we might want to start asking and including the next generation to be involved in participating in the infrastructure strategy. We set up the Young Professionals Panel. We also set up a design group and published Climate, People, Places and Value, which is a national piece of research and paper that encourages all infrastructure of national significance to respond to those issues. We also have government who've accepted our recommendations that all infrastructure of national significance should have a design level champion and respect the national infrastructure design principles. Not only is that now relevant to transport, but National Grid, Highways England, Network Rail, and nearly all the water companies have now set up design champions within their organisations and are reflecting the NIC's design principles, which were then again reflected in the National Infrastructure Strategy of 2020. So it is possible. I think it is possible to design and deliver inclusive infrastructure if we help and encourage those who are clients to ask others to be involved, to ask stakeholders to be involved, but also to set out ways in which they can successfully encourage and deliver our national infrastructure in a way that is inclusive, not only for now, but for the future. Thank you.
So it's my pleasure today to actually welcome Gilles Delabarre. You may all know that I have recently taken the presidency of the Philharmonie Cité de la Musique. And I must say that this is much beyond an infrastructure or a concert hall. These people working in the Philharmonie are doing an amazing job. And I must say that when Olivier Monteilly initially presented me the whole project about the orchestra, which is directed by Klaus Makela, and all the actions and initiatives through demos that Gilles will be presenting to you, you will see what an action can actually have, a cultural company which is basically involved in much more than actually developing the music at a top high level. You are actually facing an organization that is able to foster the inclusion overall the territory, managing to actually touch people and actually democratize culture through music. When they presented me all these actions, it made me think about Chantilly taken from Tagore, which was Rabindranath Tagore, which got the Nobel Prize of Literature back in 1913. And he had this university which was actually open to all kids, trying to actually break, all the traditional rules by actually touching the kids with new ways of actually teaching. And music was part of it. And Tagore used to say that music is what actually can fill infinity between two souls. And I think this is what they are doing. And I hope you will be as touched as I was when they presented me this initiative. And Gilles will be actually having the chance of having two students which have been actually through the demos initiative and which will testify on what did it change for them and what did they do. Yeah. Thank you, Gilles.
Thanks a lot, Gunnar. We're very proud that you're our president. And I think you're in my mind because I've would like to begin with quotation of Tagore. It's very strange. We didn't talk before. Okay, to change, it's only. Okay. So I wrote a bit because my English is not so fluent, so I need help of. So I would like to begin with very short quotation, and very important for me because it accompanies and summarizes the work I've been doing for years. It's a quote from Rabindranath Tagore, an Indian philosopher, musician, and writer who got the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1905. The quote is, "We may become powerful by knowledge, but we attain fullness by sympathy." What Tagore means by this word is directly linked to the place of arts in the life of human beings, and that education is essential to achieve this goal. Arts promote inner cultivation and responsiveness to others. Practicing arts, music in our case, give access to one's own depth and develop the ability to recognize it in others. And that's exactly what we believe in our institution. The Philharmonie de Paris Education Department is certainly the most important in Europe and in the world among institutions of the same kind. 1/3 of the budget, 1/3 of the events are dedicated to education, and that's around 100 people who work in the department. And every year, 500,000 persons are involved in the activities. The youngest are 3-month-old babies with their family. If you come as an individual or a student to the Philharmonie, you can have access to a lot of different workshops. It can be one unique workshop, or you can take part in a year's cycle, including one workshop per week. And the musical subjects can be really diversified. Early musical learning for very young people, world music. We have 40 different traditions from every continent. Javanese gamelan, for example. I'm a gamelan player. I played gamelan for a long time, maybe something like 20 years in the past. Now I have no time to do it, but West African percussion, Arabic percussions, new technology, contemporary music. You can also register for participatory concerts, etc. Impossible for me to be exhaustive. On this PowerPoint, I will present you three different and very important projects in our department. In the field of our social implication for publics who live in neighborhoods who concentrate social difficulties in our country. One is based on vocal practice. It's the Health Project, which is quite a new project that will develop in France next year, more develop in France next year. The second one, Studio 19, Studio 19, is dedicated to young people aged 16 to 24. The musical frames are creativity and new technology. And the last one is Demos. Demos, which started in 2010 and is a very important educational project in the Philharmonie. So now I will show you a teaser, a very short teaser in English, And after, I will discuss with my two young students who are involved in the demos project for years, and we will exchange. I will exchange with them. Pour le teaser, je sais pas. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you. So, you can come with me. Do I give them the microphone? Oh. Do we have to sit? Yeah. Sandra and Sally. You two have participated in demos for years. Sandra, you were involved in the project when it began in 2010. Can you tell us what you're doing now in the field of music, but also in your academic life?
When I started the demos, I was 10 years old, and now I'm 24 years old. I study computer science. I'm in a master's degree in artificial intelligence and data science. And I still continue the music at music school. I'm in the third cycle.
Yes, and it's your turn, Sally.
So I'm 18 years old, and I joined the project back in 2012. So I've been playing the violin in this project for 12 years now. I'm a first-year physics student at Sorbonne University here in Paris, and I still play the violin in my conservatory. So I still take classes, and I'm also still involved in the demos project.
All two are very good violin player. Can you tell something of your memories of demos when you were a child? You can begin, Sandra, if you want.
One of our first ambassador is Lilian Thuram, a former soccer player. And my father wasn't very interested in classical music, and when he comes to my concerts, he was sleeping in the and when he knew that there will be Lilian Thuram who will be our ambassador, he was very more enjoy to come to my concert.
I think one of my earliest memories was my first concert at the Salle Pleyel in Paris. I had attended concert in this room in the past, but I was really young still, so I wasn't really impressed by the place. But once it was my turn to actually go there and have a concert, I was so impressed because it's a beautiful venue and everything seems way bigger when you're on stage rather than when you're in the audience.
That's great. And now, it was a child memory, but now a more recent memory, if you want, Sandra.
The most recent memory that very amazed me was in last September. I played with the Orchestra of Paris, a professional orchestra at the Philharmonie of Paris, and was conducted by Klaus Makela. It was very. I played with the first violin of the Orchestra of Paris, and it was very amazing experience inside the orchestra.
And you, Sally?
Back in 2022, I was able to be a part of the Demos Europe Orchestra, which was a youth orchestra with people coming from every single country of the European Union. So it was so nice. I was able to meet so many people from different cultures. And we all spoke different languages. We all practiced music in different ways. But we were all able to connect because we all have a common interest, which is music. And so it was a really enriching experience.
All the people who came from different countries at this moment, they were involved in projects like the Demos project in Europe, except a few countries, because you are not dispositive like this in the whole Europe, but it was the majority. It was very impressed to exchange with people who live the same kind of adventure, musical adventure. And now the next question is, when we prepared this interview, we talked about your daily life in the conservatoire after Demos. And you told me anecdotes about the perceptions that some other students had or still have concerning you when you have a discussion with them. And these anecdotes sometimes expressed stereotypes against which we would like to act in the Demos project. Can you give us one of these anecdotes?
So as a person of African descent, a black person, when I first enrolled in conservatory, a lot of people were really surprised, and because I was like the only black student in the conservatory, and so a lot of people wondered why I was there and how I was there. Whether it was in conservatory or in my daily life in school, I've been asked several times if I had been adopted or not, because some people didn't really understand how come an African people could play classical music. And so I think that's something that we have never had to worry about. During the Demos project, I was never asked that question there, and it was only outside of that people had expectations.
Thanks a lot. And you, Sandra?
Since I'm Asian origins, it was more the upside down. So the other thing, because I'm Asian, I'm talentful, and I don't. It's normal if I practice a lot.
Exactly, stereotypes. Last question. If you were head of Demos, you, not me, what would be your suggestion to enhance the project? Sally, you can begin if you want.
So if I was the head of Demos, I think I would try to find a way to have more individual classes for the students during the 3 first years of the project. Because during those 3 first years, it's collective classes with several. And that can be really good because it's kind of empowering. When you play with other people, you have more confidence. But I also think that to really be able to develop yourself through music, you need to be able to have individual classes to really work on your own strengths and your own weaknesses, and also to have more confidence in yourself. Because orchestra can be a really great way to hide behind other people. and that shouldn't happen.
To me, I think the transition between demos to the music school conservatory was difficult for most of children who came from demos, because
Tell it in French.
the way to work is very different between the two of us. The music school very looks like the school, like the when you're late or you can't come, you have to tell us, and you can be late like 3 times.
You have to justify a lot.
Yeah. And so I think I would like to improve the transition, like in the most, to have more maybe theoretical courses.
Yes, that's great. So we finished. I'm really impressed by her and by you two. And I want to tell just one thing. We have 3 ambassadors here in the Demos project. One is Lilian Thuram, and the second one is Katia Buniatishvili, which is really a great female pianist. And the last who just arrived in our project is a philosopher who wears the same name as you, Sally, because his name is Diagne. It's Suleiman Bashir Diagne, which is very important philosopher today in our contemporary world. But I think that the next ambassadors will be you. I would like to invite you to come with me all the time, maybe in other countries of the world, to explain things. So thanks a lot, and we're gonna finish with a short extract of a concert with. I don't know if you were involved in this, especially in this concert. You were involved, and it was last year, and it was very nice. It was an interpretation of La Mer de Claude Debussy. Thanks a lot for welcoming us.
Well, what a fantastic inspiration that is, and I do think both of those inspirational interludes kind of brought home the role that arts and culture, in that sense that Sadie referred to, of wow and involving community at its cultural best in our thinking about making our infrastructure inclusive, I think is absolutely essential and can be transformational. So thank you again, and what a great story. I'd like to, we're now going to have a discussion more broadly about the future of infrastructure, and I'd like to invite our panel up on stage. We have Sebastian Freys, CEO of Indigo, Lucy Muniesa, who's Director of Sustainable Development and Corporate Affairs of Paprec Group, Laurent Colvet, Head of Project Finance Unit at the European Investment Bank, and John Phillips, CEO of Global Infrastructure Investor Association, and finally from Vauban Infrastructure Partners, Gwen Collin, who's the ESG Director and one of the driving forces, along with Granodo and of the InfraVision Institute. So I want to start by picking up on the conversation that we've just had earlier today about inclusive infrastructure, and particularly the 5 A's framework, and I'd like to get each of you to react to what you've heard. And if there are any particular points you want to make about that 5 A's framework and or other aspects of what you're seeing in practice as driving your concerns and actions around inclusive infrastructure. I'll start with you, Sebastian.
Yeah, thank you. It's true that in infrastructure has to face a quite historical challenge. I think so, because and especially in my industry connected to transportation infrastructure, it's true that we have to face the historical challenge because we have to change the world. I mean that in the very first step, transportation infrastructure are made for to connect people, to connect regions, to connect different areas, to connect different social classes at the end. And now we have to face a different equation. Our clients, our partners are the cities, and so they have to implement now a different way of managing these transportation solutions. And I, of course, thinking about low emission zones, and the minister mentioned it at the beginning of this session. And so that for us it's a challenge. We have to deal with more local initiative, like we know in, for example, in the city of Paris with the recent limited traffic zone, a new topic, and we have to face in the same time to the evolution of the fleet, the vehicle fleets. As you know, they are more and more electrical, they are more and more bikes, and they're very different from what they were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and so we have to work on our existing infrastructure to, I would say, redesign this infrastructure in order to accommodate this new kind of mobility solutions. And in the same time, we have to deal with this existing infrastructure in a city which is transforming itself. And so we have to face with new challenges with no apparent link with transportation, like last mile logistic issue. So a lot of challenges. And of course, when we talk about low emission zone, when we are talking about limited traffic zone, we are very close to inclusion and the way we can manage that without excluding some people from the access to the inner city, which is mean administrative centers, cultural offers, etc., etc. So yes, a great challenge for us.
Lucy, same question to you. Any particular points strike you from the conversation so far?
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. First of all, I want to thank Gwen and all of Vauban team to give me the opportunity to be here this morning. I'm very, very proud and honored to represent PAPRE Group in this event. Thank you for the question, because as I said when we prepared this session, I was a little bit jealous not to be on the first session, because we have so many things to say about social impact of our businesses. Just let you know, and I will make a focus, of course, of the activities of our group in waste management. As you know, maybe PAPRE Group is an industrial group, is a French leader in recycling. We transform waste into new resources, and it's a quite impressive, I can say, adventure, industrial adventure, and also human adventure. Because when Jean-Luc Petit-Guenin, with our founder, 30 years ago, when he decided to create PAPRE, he said, I want to build a group who act for a greener planet and a more fraternal society. As you know, this assessment today is our purpose, our raison d'être, and it's particular and still very relevant. And the human pillar is very, very important for the group. And our social impact, I would say, first of all, is for our employers. Because today the group is more than 15,000 employers in 10 countries. And we are very, very strong commitments to our HR and social policies for our employees, struggling against discrimination, diversity, equality between genders, wages and income policy, and so on. So I think it's a very, very key point for us. The second point about our social impact is for citizens, and I was very interested in what the minister said about it's important that the green transition and ecology be linked with day-to-day people. And in waste, it's perfect, because waste is in our daily life, at work, at home, and so on. And sorting waste is maybe it is a very simple and a daily ecological act, and it's a way to through our technology solution to collect and to sort waste and to define and develop a local solution for a very high performance waste management. I think we contribute a lot to people well-being, to live, to preserve, to have good condition of living and a good environment and good health as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard a lot from people who are involved in the business operations responding to this pressure and opportunity of inclusive infrastructure. But what about investors? We have 3 different investment perspectives on this panel. I'm going to start with you, John, the Global Infrastructure Investors Association. What have you been struck by, particularly this morning in the conversation so far?
Thanks, Matthew. So yeah, just by way of very brief context, the organisation that I lead represents around 100 of the leading investors in infrastructure from around the world. They collectively have about $2 trillion of infrastructure assets under management around the world across about 66 countries. And that is across the whole spectrum of what we might recognise as infrastructure, so through transport, energy, water, social infrastructure, etc. So the full range. And as you would expect, and quite rightly too, most of those, the vast majority of those investors are very focused on the sustainability and the ESG agenda. And so I was struck by the one particular part of the conversation in the previous panel, which was picking up on the S of E, S and G, and I completely agree with that point, that S has possibly been a bit overlooked or a bit overshadowed by the understandable kind of focus on tackling the environmental impacts of infrastructure and the way in which infrastructure can help overcome societal environmental concerns. So I think any thought leadership that shines a greater focus on the S of ESG is very welcome, and that's, I see the inclusion aspect of that conversation sitting very comfortably in that category. And one of the reasons why I think that's so important is because the model of private investment in public infrastructure requires public confidence and trust. And so it requires organisations like mine and the individual members concerned to actually build legitimacy for the private investment model. And so, again, anything that helps my members to bring a greater focus on the positive impacts that they can bring to society and communities through their investments is very welcome. And I think the whole area of inclusion is probably quite new as a concept for investors. When you start to delve into it, it's probably already being subconsciously considered by a lot, but the question is it being consciously considered? So I think there is some work that we could do as a follow-up on this to sort of bring shine more of a light on the issue.
Thank you, John. Laurent, with the project finance perspective and at the European Investment Bank.
Yes, thanks. First of all, I would like to thank Vauban for inviting the European Investment Bank to participate in this panel. So what I can say on inclusive infrastructure, and from what I've heard during the previous panel, is that, of course, collaboration among all infrastructure stakeholders is absolutely necessary in the implementation of infrastructure projects, because simply those projects have a major footprint on the environment and also have some impact on the people that are surrounding those assets. So one can only welcome, of course, this approach. But now, and I think this is also very important for financial institutions, which are more and more concerned about the reputational risk. Now, if I can play also the devil's advocate, I would like also to say that at the same time, we need to ensure that infrastructures that benefit to the majority of a population or a group, a country, that those infrastructures are not blocked by a minority of opponents which are actually strongly against any change, and that also do not and are not willing actually to make any compromise. I think in a world where people are more and more antagonized, and we can see that election after election, this, I think, will be a major challenge that will need to be tackled in the implementation of future major infrastructure projects.
Thank you. And Gwen from Vauban.
Yes, maybe a quick word. So thank you very much for all of you to be here today. It has been a real pleasure to listen to all your says and the previous panel and keynote speakers. So we have been working on this report. It's the 5th report we are working on. It's the 5th year we do those open research. It's always eye-opening, but honestly, each year we are tackling a different angle of the ESG parameters, and being long-term investors and investing in essential infrastructure for us is crucial to have that sustainable future, sustainable infrastructures, meaning being resilient, adaptable to what is happening around us. So I would say today was very interesting to see that it's taking roots. I would say a few years ago we were speaking about climate, decarbonization was a key word. Now we are speaking about just transition. We're speaking about how we speak with everyone. When we were working on social license to operate, was about the different people that we're interacting with. Today we are speaking about our own employees, we're speaking about our clients, we're speaking about the citizen around our infrastructures, and it's very interesting to see how we open the discussion and we make sure that everyone is around the table and that we take everyone in consideration in order to move forward. I'm a true believer that if we don't have everyone in the picture and align interest, we go nowhere in climate change, but also in social transitioning. So,
thank you. So I wanted to dig a bit deeper into the two operational panelists here about what you're seeing, practically in terms of what you're doing to implement inclusive infrastructure and what you've learned so far as you've done that. And start with you, Lucy.
Yes, and I would like to make a testimony about our key issue on this topic. And first of all, I would say we must always, for PAPREC, it's a key issue and it's in our DNA, to think local. Because we need to develop and propose to our customer local solution, tailor-made local solution, tailor-made to the local needs. For example, maybe you know that PAPREC operates, manages the yellow bin, le bac jaune, with recyclable household waste for more than 1 in 3 French people. We build and we operate sorting centers in France. In global, we operate more than 300 industrial local sites in France. And also we operate waste to energy plants. We produce low carbon heat and power from non-recovery waste, and we dedicate this special energy for local use, for local needs, for local decarbonization. So this way to think local and to give to have the good solution, the good offer to tackle this is a very, very important for accessibility of our infrastructure. Then our responsibility as a leader group in our business, I would say, is to think big and bigger and to offer the best-in-class infrastructure and the best, the most, how to say, high technical and high performance solution to optimize the way our customers can manage their waste. And it's very, very, very important to have tailor-made and local solution and to have the excellence, the best technologies and the best solutions.
Thank you. And Sebastian, similarly for you, I mean, particularly, I mean, I'd love you to touch on this challenge that the reporters raised, that, we're looking at focusing on inclusivity and the S at the same time as there is obviously a transition, particularly in the industry you're in, towards more sustainability as well. And how do you balance the different opportunities and risks there? What are you finding in practice?
Yeah, it's true that we have a specific situation because we are largely deployed, for example, in France and in some other countries, but our main assets are at the end concession assets. So it means that we are always working with cities on the way they want to deploy their policy. I mean, pricing policy, restriction in terms of access. And so we try to support them I would say, to make the good choices. And we are very concerned by the fact that if we want people, if you want that the solutions are efficient, we need that the solution needs to be acceptable, understood, seen as, I would say, equitable. And so, for example, we are trying to convince our French clients concerning low emission zone that perhaps they would have to look at what was already deployed in other countries, because low emission zone, you have to have in mind that it's at the beginning a European directive, so it means that every country in Europe are concerned, but unfortunately France is very late. We are not so surprised at the end. So it means that we have a lot of pressure to deploy, and so we feel that to face to this kind of emergency, things are going to be very simple. And unfortunately, simplicity is probably not the best way to do it. For example, in some countries, as they have to face the same challenges, they decided not to go to the zero right access for some vehicles because they are not the good level of emissions, but they decided to not to cut this access, but to reduce it. And so if you don't have the good vehicle, you cannot do what you want, but you can access to the core of the city once a month, once a week, twice a month, so it depends. And so it is very smart because it enables these people not to have to change their vehicle immediately. They don't have means for that. And so things are obviously more complex, but much more acceptable and so much more sustainable at the end. And so it's the kind of positioning we have with the cities, try to convince them that finally these apparently complex solutions are very available and not so difficult to deploy as we already do it in other countries. And so, of course, we try to convince the city that we can reconciliate this energy transition, I would say, the challenge, and remain the connection purpose of infrastructure in terms of transportation. So it's not so easy, as you understand, but we are quite confident that progressively we will have, I would say, more relevant solutions to deploy.
Great. Well, we're now going to talk more broadly about the future trends that we're seeing in infrastructure. And we're doing that in the context of the launch of this new think tank, InfraVision, by Vauban, and which is building very much, as Gwen was saying, on the work of the 4 previous years' reports and some podcasts that we've done and various other convenings that have taken place. And I wanted to ask Gwen specifically, you talk to us a little bit more about the DNA and ambition of InfraVision, and what lessons you've drawn from all the work that's been conducted over the past few years about why this think tank is needed.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. So, as Matthew was saying, he has been working with us on several of those research, so he's getting used to us. In fact, yes, we are leveraging on those past 4 years, it's the 5th year, like I said, and we just opened the think tank in March. It was following the very good, I would say, feedback we received from last year. Let's say it's growing. Every year we have more positive feedback, more people willing to work with us. And the idea was really to break the silos, where we're always, I would say, invited to go in groups between financial players. We see our industrial working in silos in their own industries, and we see the regulators doing work group between each other. But it was very hard, I would say, to have a common conversation. And year after year, we found it much more easy to bring the people around the table. I'm looking at Sébastien because he's used to this exercise, Lucy also. They have been very patient with us and very involved, I will say, in all those research. So the methodology is the same every year. We are working with everyone who are involved in the infrastructure, from the European Commission, the OCDE, public authorities, industrials at the C-level, financial players, but also academics, to the top level, to the Nobel Prize. We have each year some very high-level people involved in the academic world working on those topics and doing incredible work. but they are not always read by the industrials or by the financial players. I don't know about the regulators, but it's a real shame, because then by exchanging together, and we saw in real lifetime, I think Mathieu, you were there also during the podcast, by discussing together around the same topic, the same priorities and problematics, they were finding solutions, and they were having discussion after those podcasts or those panels. And that was incredible for us, because we're kind of eye-opening of the fact that they don't have those kind of fields which are quite friendly. And the idea is not to end up screaming at each other. At least we are on the panel, so we can't do it in direct life. But it's very opening the conversation, breaking those silos, and finding pragmatic solutions. So now the think tank, of course, we have this annual research, but the idea is also to open it to other members. So today we have 12 members in the association. It's an association. It's not branded Vauban anymore. It's InfraVision. And they are people coming from the industry and willing to work toward open topics. So they bring their own idea, their own problematics, and we work together around those topics. So more than happy, if you are interested to join, more than happy to have this discussion. I saw some of them here in the room, so I'm pretty sure they will be happy also to share their experience. But above that, we also have a strategic committee which is reviewing our research and giving that academic regulatory point of view, and assessing what we are doing to make sure that it does make sense for the entire sectors. So breaking the silos, working together, making sure we work with industry, but also with other initiatives. The idea is not to reinvent the wheel, but to work together toward pragmatic solutions. And at Vauban, I mean, the goal is for each of the research that we bring back some pragmatic solution for our own way of managing our asset, doing our due diligence. That the only aim at the end of the day is to get best practices in-house also. So very happy to share them with you today.
Great, thank you. Well, I think it's fair to say that infrastructure as a word is not a word that has always got everyone's pulses racing and their visionary mindset on. And so I'm very delighted that you've managed to find a name for the think tank that I think does capture that energy that is needed now as we think through the role of infrastructure, which is so pivotal in so many of the big transformations that are going on in the world at the moment, everything from economic transformation to digital to social, environmental and geopolitical, where obviously events in America yesterday are also going to have a big effect on many of the conversations that we're going to need to have about the role of infrastructure, among many other things. So what I'd like to do is ask each of our speakers to sort of take a step back, think about the next 10 or 15 years in the part of the infrastructure world that they know best, and to sort of talk a bit about the sorts of trends that you're seeing and that maybe that the InfraVision think tank can do future work on to help make sure that we find the opportunities in those trends and minimize the downside risks. And I'm going to start by asking, actually I'll start with John. Maybe you go first.
Thanks. It's such a big question, and so I'll try to sort of probably talk in headline terms, and then we can always delve into some of these issues in more detail if that's where you want to go. So when I was thinking about preparing for this panel, there's a number of dilemmas that are at the heart of the conversations that we have on behalf of our members or with our members when we are engaging with governments and regulators in the different markets. The dilemmas are largely transcend all of the markets. They're rarely specific to one or two. So there's a big dilemma around investability versus affordability. And this issue, I mean, it's one of the A's that you've picked up on in affordability. So how do we strike the right balance between investing for the long term and the fiduciary duties that investors have for a return on that investment? versus the short-term impact on consumer bills, as we are, committing substantial long-term funds. And not forgetting that in many cases, it is people like you and I and everyone else in this room whose pension funds are being invested by fund managers, and they require a return on that investment. They want their retirement to be as comfortable an experience as possible. So there is this dilemma between government ambition and vision, regulators when they're involved in price setting and their way of interpreting the best way forward of delivering the infrastructure, and the attractiveness to that sector. And that attractiveness is by market as well as by sector. Investors are, can be sitting in any part of the world and have the ability to deploy their capital in any market around the world. So there is a degree of international competition to attract that capital. And it will be absolutely fascinating to see what happens to the US on the back of the emerging results from the election overnight for all those funds that have ploughed in. I think I saw a stat the other day, something like $360 billion of investment in clean energy in the US just in the last 2 years. I mean, it's an extraordinary kind of flow of capital. So international competition for capital is a big theme. This investability versus affordability is a big theme. Resiliency, I think, is another not emerging, it's already here. I mean, we are already seeing the impacts of climate change on infrastructure today. That is having the ability to impact customers' experience. So what are investors and governments in partnership doing about building greater resiliency? I mean, I think to the credit of the minister that spoke earlier, that talked about some of the work that the leadership that France is now taking on in sort of assessing that whole resilience piece. I know in the UK, the National Infrastructure Commission has also just published some work in that regard. So it is clearly a up-and-coming issue. How are we going to adapt our infrastructure to meet a more uncertain climate world? And how are we going to pay for that resilience? What level of resilience do customers, society expect? And what are they prepared to pay for? Because you can build 100% resiliency into almost any part of infrastructure you want. It's just that you have to pay for it. And that's a big, big challenge. So
you've launched a public attitudes tracker, I gather, to...
Well, we've been working with Ipsos Mori for a few years now. It's their survey rather than ours. So just to be clear, it's not one of those surveys that we commission in order to get the results that we want, so that we can then, get the coverage for it. It is their survey. They design it. They conduct it. It's the biggest survey of its kind. It's a public attitudes survey across, I think, 30 countries. It's got a massive sample size of about 25,000 people. So it's quite a credible piece of research. And what it does is sort of highlight some interesting, I think, similarities and disparities in the way the public think about infrastructure in those different markets. One of them being, to our surprise, that satisfaction with infrastructure in some of the what you might call emerging markets is actually often much higher than satisfaction with infrastructure in the more established and mature markets. So why is that? And it's probably down to expectation management. I think if you are in a more emerging economy, perhaps your expectations of the quality and reliability of the infrastructure are not as high. Whereas in a mature market, you expect it to be available 100% of the time and to the highest possible quality, and it's never, going to be that. So levels of dissatisfaction are higher in some of the. But the survey, I mean, it's published on our website. So sake of brevity today, I won't talk for too much about it, but it does highlight some very interesting trends around recognition of the importance of investing in infrastructure, the job creation side of that, the importance of its ability to deliver against the net zero targets, and also probably greater levels of public support about the role of private investment in infrastructure than we might initially have expected.
Laurent, with your investment banking hat on, what do you see as the main trends?
Financing, so financing infrastructure projects is clearly at the heart of the activity of the EIB. And I think that we can say already that a lot of changes have occurred in the last few years in the infrastructure and project financing world. I can describe actually what happened at the EIB. It's a public bank with some specificities, but I think it can be also quite representative of other financial institutions active in the infrastructure financing world. So historically, the EIB has been financing mostly what we could call traditional infrastructures, such as transport infrastructure, social infrastructures, like dwellings, like hospitals, of course, energy infrastructures, and mostly renewable energy projects. And so these projects, as it has been said before, are the backbone of our economy and our society. And as such, they do benefit from a strong support from public authorities. But more recently, we have entered actually into new sectors. And I think the definition of infrastructure seems to have expanded, actually. So those new sectors, which could be qualified as industrial sectors or manufacturing also, are projects that do not benefit to the same extent from public support. Usually they are developed fully by private sector. And in the past, until very recently, they were not financed through project financing, non-recourse project financing structures. So these industrial projects include assets such as EV battery gigafactories, recycling projects, so textile, plastic, battery recycling, critical raw materials projects from extraction to refining and processing, or another example, synthetic fuels production plants. And I believe that this trend is going to continue in the future because those assets are deemed critical now for the sovereignty and for the strategic autonomy of the EU, and especially in the context, the current context of reindustrialization of the continent. So this is where I see actually the evolution of the infrastructure sector.
Thank you. Lucy, waste is increasingly at the top of people's agenda around circularity in the economy and so forth. How do you, what do you see as the major trends there in terms of the infrastructure implications of all that over the next 10 to 15 years?
Yes, thank you. And it will be a perfect transition with what Laurent told us, because I wanted to say exactly the same thing. The major trend will be to accelerate, and I focus at the European level. I won't deal with American issues. Is to accelerate towards a circular economy at the European level. It's very, very important. We are not at the point today, and I'm very happy to see that Mrs. von der Leyen, for her new mandate and her commission, she announced a Circular Economy Act by the end of 2025. So I think that now the policymakers at the European level are really convinced that it's a key issue. It's a key issue because, first of all, it's a need for industrial development in Europe and reindustrialization in France, because we have this specific topic in France. This means needs for raw materials, and this means huge needs for solutions for carbon-free or low-carbon solution and energy. And then, exactly what you say, it's a key issue for European resilience and sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, but energy sovereignty, and so on. The very classical example is for metal and scrap recycling. We have huge needs to support the green transition, and recycling is a circular economic, and recycling is very, very important at the cornerstone of this. I was on a global and a European decision-making point of view. As a responsible group and an industrial group involved in the waste management, we must and we will go on to innovate and implement solutions to achieve 2 points. The first one, and you know, it's very important for us, is eco-design of products. I was very happy to hear when during Sadie's presentation that eco-design must be involved at the beginning of the project, and it's exactly the same for products. You have to think about the end of life of your product when you create it. It's a key issue. And then the second point is developing new recycling value chains. You mentioned plastic, for example, and as much as possible in a closed loop, because it's the best way to maximize circularity for materials and resources.
Thank you. And Sebastian, similarly for, I guess not just car parks, which will we even need them in the future of self-driving cars, through to all aspects of transportation. What do you see as the big trends?
Yeah, the big trends, as I mentioned, is that every city are concerned by the energy transition. It is not a pure big cities or Paris city topic. So you have to have it in mind. But of course, it drives to different solutions and discussions. In some medium cities, we have to build now new car parks because the mayors doesn't want any longer to have a lot of cars and they are on street in their streets. So they prefer terraces, they prefer squares, they prefer bike lanes, etc. So it's a new trend for us. And of course, in big cities, we have a big challenge is to work on the existing infrastructure, as I said, because we have to transform them in order to accommodate new activities, new kind of mobility solutions. And so it's a high level of capex, again, a high level of investment, even on existing infrastructure. And it's true that it's quite difficult to, in a concession model, to take the risk of this kind of investment, having so many incentives in terms of evolutions for the next 15, 20 years. What will be the traffic in Paris in 20 years, nobody knows. I don't know, and the city of Paris doesn't know. And so we try to make the traditional concession model evolve in order to I would say, a good balance in terms of risk. So it's, of course, the first point. So we have to innovate more and more. It's true that we have especially to have a larger and larger I would say toolbox for our cities, because 20 years ago every mayor wanted more or less the same thing. It's very different today, and so we have to be able to address both medium cities to the bigger ones. We have to diversify our activity. It means that we have to also we are working on car park surfaces transformation to deploy and implement last mile logistic platform. So it's new skills for us, new business model, new business line potentially, and the same for EV charging. So it's true that for Indigo, this moment is key and is a historical moment in terms of I would say in terms of skills implementation, for sure.
So I think underlying all of these trends is going to be the need for public-private partnerships to be more and more core to all infrastructure delivery, and none of you has particularly touched on that yet, but are there any, and we're short of time, any quick points anyone would like to make about, you know, what needs to happen to make those public-private partnerships work better? Maybe to stick with you, Sebastian, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's true that it's a key point for us that while we have to face so many changes, more or less the specification we received when we have a public tender are more or less the same that 20 years ago. So it's a paradox we have to deal with, and so it's true that we have especially to deal with the fact that the city are focused yet about their financing, but in the same time they want to reduce some activities, some traffic. So it means that at the moment they will have to change their the way they analyze offers and the way they want to implement solutions, because it's true that we cannot imagine that we could have to face the same way of being challenged in this new world with a lot of uncertainty, and so I think we have to address this new need of a new kind of partnership between public and private, with new contract models, perhaps with new specifications, etc. So, and it's a pity that finally this point is not really improving.
John, did you want to say anything?
Just quickly, I mean, some investors respond to market signals, and so I think we are starting to see some market signals coming through, I think, from governments that PPPs are becoming more universally acceptable, but there's probably more work to be done to build into the construct of those PPPs more social benefit. And that there was a model that was being pioneered in Wales, actually, called the mutual investment model, which is worth taking a look at for people that have an interest in this area, because it was specifically designed to try and introduce that kind of more social benefit component to the traditional PPP contract. And that, as far as I'm concerned, can only be a good thing, because coming back to right at the beginning of this discussion from me is anything that improves public confidence, trust and legitimacy is a good thing for the sector long term.
Great. Well, we're almost out of time, and I wanted to end with asking Gwen about Vauban's vision for the infrastructure of tomorrow, and then to ask each of our panelists if they would suggest one topic that might be a good one for InfraVision to focus on before Gwen reveals what actually they're thinking of doing for next year as the main theme for the report. So, Gwen, what about the Vauban vision?
I'm very humbled by speaking about all those topics, but I mean, I think what we have been seeing through all those research, all those conversations, is that it's not a transition that we are facing, it's a revolution, and it's not only an environmental revolution, it's a social revolution, it's an economic revolution, geopolitical revolution, it's a digital revolution. So if we don't take all those factors in consideration, we go nowhere. And we saw some of those very stringent, I would say, exercise here in France with a yellow vest, for example, when we decided to do some changes on the cost of the daily life due to climate change, and we saw the result in the street. So it's very important. Once again, there are many things to be done. Things are accelerating. One of the conclusions, I mean, was the opening of last year research is by 2050 we'll have 80% of the population in urban area, and half of the infrastructure needed is not done yet. So the conception is now, we have to do the conception right in our infrastructure, conception in terms of circularity, but also in terms of accessibility, in terms of social integration, to make sure that everybody got access to those infrastructure, that we are achieving a goal, which is to address essential infrastructure for the society, which is the aim of our core investment. So all that is extremely important, but we can't do it by ourselves. So we need to work together. We need to work with our industrial partners. We work with our regulators, with other initiatives, together with academics who are working on it, with the schools who are working exactly on the same topic that we do. So just, I would say open our chakra and let's work together towards those solutions that do not maybe exist, but that we have to create together. So I will not reveal the conclusion of the report, so you can download it or take it outside, but we just pose 4 different themes that we thought would be important to tackle in the coming years, but very happy to open it to other thematics or other topics that you feel that are missing out. But of course, adaptability. We are long-term investors, it's a long-term infrastructure, but they need to be adaptable. So PPP's contract is a good example, how we work with the public authorities in order to be able to adapt our contract, to have a regulatory framework that help us to have the right way of adapting our infrastructure to the needs that are evolving, also to the risks that are evolving. Special planning for the city of tomorrow, extremely important. Not only the city, but also the countryside. How we make sure we work with the local collectivity in order to be aware of their needs and to be aware of what we can bring to answer those needs. Making sure that we have the right level of security on strategic infrastructure to face the shifting global order that we are. There is a lot of noise around what's happening those days, but we are long-term investors, we are long-term industrial partners. All infrastructures are here to support the society on the long run. So just to make sure that we can continue our work in a peaceful way, I would say, without being too much impacted with all the noise happening here and there, I would say. But all those topics, more than happy to, once again, we'll have time to discuss after. We have here around the place some people from first of all from Vauban, who have been very involved in those research, from the membership, and also from our strategic committee. I think that Andres is here. So more than happy to continue the discussion with all of you, and you can also follow us. We're on LinkedIn or online. Please don't hesitate.
Thank you. So I know we have a live stream coming in a couple of minutes for a final keynote. So can I just ask each of you just one sentence on what you would like to read a report on from InfraVision next year? Sebastian.
I would say new PPP model to face to this new era. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think innovation is key in today's world, and I would be interested to see what would be the financial instruments needed actually to be able to accompany infrastructure projects and developers that are developing innovative projects.
Thank you. Lucy.
I would say 2 words, ambition and action.
John.
So I think there's something around technology and its impact on society for good and potentially for bad, and how we think about that going forward would be a good topic to consider. But I also like the PPP one.
So Gwen, do you want to reveal what your current thinking is for next year?
No, I think I said a lot already. Maybe 2 words, join us. Come join us to all those initiatives, not only InfraVision, but let's all work together and find solutions together.
Okay, well, on that note of welcome and an invitation to take part in the future work of InfraVision, we'll wrap up this panel. I think we have a final keynote and then some closing remarks from Gwenola, but a big round of applause for this panel. Thank you.
We We now will have a live stream with Alessia Mosca, which is a former member of the European Parliament back from 2014 to 2019. She is currently Secretary General of the Italian Asian Association. She has been a very outstanding figure fighting for equality in terms of gender equality, and she's paving the way for actually allowing women to actually reach leadership roles, and I leave her the grounds.
Good morning everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. Congratulations for the very rich discussion that I followed this morning. So I've been asked in my speech to talk about inclusion, especially inclusion of women, and I will try to give you the perspective from Italy, so the Italian perspective, talking about things that I have followed during my entire life. But in addressing this issue of inclusion, I would like to switch the perspective and namely try to start from the idea of exclusion. And I would like to start asking ourselves, who are we excluding in our daily lives through our behaviors? And perhaps we are excluding her just because she's a woman. We are excluding her because she is black, or him because he's young or an artist, or him because he has a disability, or again, her because she's old, or her because of her religion. And we can continue with an endless list of possible exclusions based on gender, religion, ethnicity, age, or simply because they are not part of our well-known community. And I really wanted to start showing you some faces because sometimes when we speak about these issues, we use general terms, and that give us the impression that we are dealing with abstract ideas, while we are having a concrete impact on real people. And it's also important that we are aware that, in fact, there is a direct responsibility of anybody of us in excluding these people. Each of us is responsible not only if we are directly putting in place an exclusion, but also if we are simply not trying to proactively modify all the circumstances that are in place where an exclusion is perpetrated since the origin of humankind or for very recent ideologies. So excluding someone seems to have mainly a negative moral connotation, which is very true, but there are also many other implications that are to be considered. And first of all, in our society and in the present conditions of our economy, exclusion is either a missed opportunity at best or an unbearable cost in a majority of the cases. So to continue in the line of concreteness, I would like to share with you some examples, 3 examples based on my direct experience that are all proactive actions that addressed or are trying to address the exclusion of women in different perspectives. And the first one is the gender quota law on board of directors. I know that in France is a very well-known piece of legislation, but I would like to bring and to share with you the experience from Italy, where we had quite a specific, we lived quite a specific situation, a real revolution somehow. I presented and supported the gender quota law more than 10 years ago. And for many years, Italy was one of the worst performers for the presence of women in board of directors. We were at around 6% of women appointed in board of directors, and the majority of them were of the family owning the company. And there were no increase in the decades before. So in 2011, the Gulf of Moscow law was approved, and we very quickly reached 40% of women on boards, and became, from being one of the worst performing, we became one of the best performing worldwide. And today, thanks to the time span that we had to measure the broader implications, we can confirm that more diverse governance has a direct impact on better economic performance, on resilience, on better protection against risks, and so on and so forth. And from this example, the lesson learned is that society is sometimes more ready to change than what we expect. One example is the effort that ATM, the public transport company of the city of Milan, is making to change its internal culture, its buildings, the facilities, in general, the approach to flexible working hours to attract more women in positions that commonly are perceived as primarily masculine, such as drivers or engineers. Like all the other transport companies all over Europe, ATM is dealing with a huge shortage of drivers and technical expertise. And the cost of this situation is becoming more and more significant. And in this case, a more inclusive policy can be one of the possible solutions and a way of improving the working conditions for everybody and guaranteeing a better service for all the citizens and in general to have a well-functioning city. And again, in this case, the lesson that we are learning is that needs are really variegated and there is not one size fits all recipe. We have to use creativity and to be flexible to put in place all the needed solutions. The third example is for me the most important because it concerns the cost of excluding girls from scientific skills. We all know that a demographically declining society and the fast technological development require more and more people to have STEM skills. And yet we are experiencing, in the majority of cases, many cases, the opposite trend. Paradoxically, Italy, which is one of the most rapidly demographically declining nations together with Japan, is also experiencing one of the widest gender gaps in math skills. It is 77th out of 79 OECD countries for this sort of gap. So in trying to address this costly exclusion of half of the population, together with some friends, among which the astrophysicist Ersilia Vauto, we created the initiative Il Cielo Itinerante, the Traveling Sky, which is a not-for-profit organization aiming to bring the sky where it usually does not arrive. And what does it mean? It means that with a van filled with telescopes, we go to remote areas of our countries to stimulate the desire to study science and math as the observation of the universe since the origin of humankind stimulated to go farther. And through our activity, we are discovering that the dream gap is the real obstacle for girls to make different choices. In this case, the lesson learned so far is that stereotypes start very early in life, and it is very important to have an holistic approach working together with boys and girls. These are only some examples, and many other could be mentioned, but the general message that I want to deliver, and it's always the same. Every single action, even the simplest, can promote inclusion, and by contrast, not engaging is accepting exclusion with all the consequences and all the costs. And by the way, here are some of the people that I mentioned before that we would have excluded if we would have followed our belief. Judy Cohen, an American aerospace engineer, John McFarlane, British Paralympic, and finally, another athlete, Sifan Hassan, that is part of the refugee team. Thank you very much, and I really hope that you will follow the discussion with the same interest as before.
So thank you to all of you. It has been actually a very interesting morning. We hope we have kept you entertained with all these issues. I must say that we picked a subject which we felt was actually of paramount importance. It's true that in infrastructure, we touch everybody's lives on a daily basis. And at the end of the day, it matters that we effectively produce something which is going to be producing something useful for the best interest of the largest number of people. So the minister was referring earlier to Amartya Sen, which is an economist, a Nobel Prize of, if I remember well, 1998. And Amartya Sen was saying, I believe that virtually all problems in the world are actually related to inequality of one kind or another. And it's interesting because Amartya Sen was also a student in the Tagore University that I was referring earlier, the Shintinitekan, which was a very, a solar personality, Tagore. And we need more people like that. We actually are facing a situation where, over the last few years, the trend of polarization of our societies has accelerated. And trust me, when you see the results of the American election, we cannot say it more. We are facing situations where we have increasingly tended to build fences around ourselves. We don't trust each other because we don't take the time to understand and to know each other. So we need, definitely, if you want to have a fighting chance in the current environment with the many challenges that we face in our generation, we need to chart a new way of working together. And the very spirit of what we have created with InfraVision is exactly that. We want to build actually bridges. We don't want to build walls anyway. There's no way we could actually face the challenge ahead if we don't work together, if we don't roll up our sleeves and work together. So that's the very spirit of what we have created, and I couldn't agree more than what Gwen was telling you. Join us, because the idea is to work together, and only working together we will achieve the appropriate path. So thank you to all of you. We have a cocktail now, and hope you enjoyed yourself with us. Thank you.